it's okay, I'd like to start with a reading of a book that I wrote called Life on Purpose, and it's just the first page. There's a spoiler alert in this, though, I want to warn you. June 20th, 2010, 5:15 a.m., in my kayak, a few miles from shore, paddling hard. Lake Michigan smooth and ice cold. My kayak cutting through a thick, silky curtain of water off the bow. Still in boxers and t-shirt, hadn't thought about dressing for the chilly morning air, wasn't really thinking. Been woken by a dream, climbed out of bed, and a minute later pushed off into the lake. Not very smart. Lake Michigan owns hundreds of ships, and certainly its share of puny kayaks. I didn't really care. Maybe I'll paddle to Wisconsin, I thought. But the sun stopped my paddling as it broke over the horizon. I turned toward the east and sat still, perfectly quiet. Suddenly, a billion gold flecks of light surrounded me as the sun rose. In that moment, I felt the warmth and the love of my daughter, Julia. "Get over it, Dad," she was telling me. I almost tipped over. It was startling to hear her voice. She had died just a few months before. The crossroad of my life was right there, 2 miles off the shore of Lake Michigan. The signs were clear. One arrow said, "Change everything," and the other said, "Death." And Julia wasn't derisively telling me to get over it. She was telling me that if I was to survive, I'd need to get over myself and live for what matters most. When I came back to shore, I realized that it was Father's Day. This is her gift to me, the gift that would save my life. So my daughter was born healthy, and suddenly she caught this chickenpox virus that we all get. Typically, our children get it. We get a rash, we get a fever for a few days, and it goes away. This attacked her heart, this chickenpox virus, and it totally destroyed her heart when she was 6 months old. We were told that the only hope that she had was a heart transplant. And back in 1990, very, very few children had ever gotten heart transplants, and we even had to ask ourselves, should we list her for a new heart? So we sat around our gathering place, our dinner table, and we discussed that. Should we list her for a new heart? And we decided that if we could give her a big life, whatever that meant, a big life, a life worth living, it would be okay to go ahead and get her a new heart. Be okay to list her, knowing that 50% of kids died before getting a heart, and even within the first 5 years of getting a new heart, 50% of those kids died. So we knew the odds, and they weren't great. She ended up becoming the first child in the southeastern part of the United States to get a new heart. It was wonderful, and it was a miracle for her, almost like a brain transplant. It was just amazing. And we gave her a very big life. So every day we treated that day, that week, that year as if that might be her last. And one thing we started realizing is that that's not a bad way to live. The Stoic philosophers used to live that way. They used to wake up in the morning and go, "I'm going to die today." Can you imagine Marcus Aurelius, famous Stoic philosopher, saying, "I'm going to die today," and then Mrs. Aurelius saying, "Would you stop that? You always say that, and then you come home alive," unfortunately. "Eat your granola and stop saying you're going to die." No, I'm dying because I am going to live so big today. That's so important to us, so important to me. And then suddenly she just died when she was 19 years old. She was in nursing school at the University of Michigan, where I teach. And of course, that's a difficult thing to go through. I'm nothing special, by the way. I'm guessing every single person in this room has gone through something very difficult in their life. This isn't about me being special. That's not what this talk is about. But at that time, we were told that we would need to grieve in our own way. And my wife, who's an artist, and a gardener, decided to garden and sculpt back in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I decided to go to northern Michigan and eat and drink myself to death. So I went up, I was by myself for quite a long time. I started watching anything that was on TV. I cared for some reason about what Kim Kardashian was doing. I have nothing against her, but I think that's one of the signs of, big problems going down the road. So I realized that I was going downhill. And I found myself 2 miles out on Lake Michigan going, wow, I'm at a crossroad of my life. I literally am. I could go ahead and paddle to Wisconsin, which is another 80 miles, no problem, in my boxers and t-shirt, and dead of morning. Or I could go back, but if I go back, I'm going to have to change my life, and change it in a very big way. I also want to say that I made myself in these drawings look thinner and more handsome than I really am. I told the illustrator to do that, and he said, "It's your book, dude, whatever you want." But I did tell him this. I said, "I want you to make my daughter Julia to look exactly the way she was." And this is my daughter, Julia. So I came back to shore. The University of Michigan had said, "Boy, you don't have to teach for this whole year if you don't want, really. I mean, you just lost your daughter. We can't imagine a more difficult thing to go through." And I was like this. I didn't know what was going on, but I thought, I'm a behavioral scientist at the University of Michigan. I help people make changes in their lives. So I started asking myself, if you can't fix yourself, Vic, what good are you? Really? I mean, become worth your salt. Look down on you for a change from on high and say, fix me. I have to, somehow I have to fix myself. So I wrote down on just a sheet of paper my best self characteristics. And that's a big theme for today. So as I'm talking, I want you to maybe think about, what am I like when I'm at my best? I wasn't at my best at all. I wasn't energized. I wasn't engaged. I certainly wasn't creative or curious or helping anyone else. I was feeling sorry for myself and totally focused on myself and my problems. I was not my best self. But I wrote down my aspirational best self. And then I said, what matters most to me? And I said things like love, our older daughter, Rachel, my wife, Jerry, beauty, the world, because I care about that, my parents, and my students. So I called the university back and said, you know what, I want to go back and start teaching my students as soon as possible, actually, and I'm going to teach them all as if they're my daughter. That changed my whole life. Starting to apply myself, my best self, to the things that mattered most started making me purposeful again. That's the definition of purposeful, applying your best self. What are you like when you're at your best? Now apply it to the things that matter most, okay? Let's look at college students. This is a group that I teach, and I've taught students for over 30 years. There's a huge study that's been done of over 200,000 college students called the Healthy Mind Study. And this study has looked at over 200,000 students for over 10 years in over 180 colleges and universities. In 2009, 10 years ago, they found that 8% of students had major depression by a really nice standardized scale. Now, it's over double that. It's 18%. Unbelievable, the kind of students that we're facing now. Suicidal ideation. Have you thought about killing yourself in the last 12 months? That's what people ask these students. 10 years ago, it was 7%. Now it's almost double that, 13%. Need to do something about this. This question is also asked. You can ask yourself. This question is asked to the students. Ask yourself. On a scale of 1 to 7, where 1 is no purpose and 7 is super big purpose, I lead a purposeful and meaningful life. Where are you on that? Let's just be generous and take the 1s to 4s and say, that's the red zone. That's not so great. 1 to 4. Lots of you are probably 4s or 3s, I would think. Then there are 5s and 6s. That's the yellow zone. And then there's the green zone. That's the 7. You have a super big, strong purpose in your life. So, by the way, that's declining rapidly among our college students. When you look at college students who are climbing this ladder of life, climbing this slope of life, and we look at the greens versus the yellows versus the reds in terms of their purpose in their life, we find in terms of depression, 3 times as much depression among the reds. We find 7 times as much suicidal ideation among the reds. That's very scary, isn't it? Especially as purpose, our direction, the goal-directed sense that we are here for a reason is declining. Let's look at that slope that students are in. So there are 3 groups here of students that were assigned. 1 control group, 1 group that was given a backpack that has 25 pounds of dead weight in it, just barbells, dumbbells in the back, and they were told that. And then the 3rd group, they had those same dumbbells in there, the same barbells, just dead weight, but they included this electric fan in the back. Odd, isn't it? Just this little electric fan whirring away, had nothing to do with anything, but then here's what they said. You people are carrying 25 pounds of important scientific equipment. Important scientific equipment that's going to benefit our science, our study, as well as the world Isn't that awesome? So these guys thought they had a purpose and a heavy backpack. This group said, I have no purpose and heavy backpack. This group said, I guess I must be in the control group. We blindfolded all of them. They blindfolded them, and they put them on a slope that was 14.5 degrees. Now, this has been done a lot in psychology, where they ask them, what do you think the slope is like, blindfolded? What do you think that slope is? People typically estimate a much steeper slope. Now, that's metaphorical, isn't it? Because whatever slope we're on in our lives, we tend to think, oh, that's a really steep slope, right? So, question is, what did people think? Well, in the control group, they doubled the slope size in their mind. They said, wow, this is a very steep slope, 31 degrees. The people with the purposeless backpack, just carrying the backpack of dead weight, they thought that the slope was 42 degrees. 42 degrees. How about the purposeful backpack people? Remember what the control group was, 31 degrees? It's exactly what the purposeful group thought. In other words, if you have a purpose, the slope starts dissolving, starts going away. You stop noticing it as much. That's resilience. Let's study that a little bit more. Let's study resilience along with colleagues that we have around the country, putting people in an MRI. And they clamp their head down and they monitor their brain and they show them images while they're in MRI intended to do a couple of things. And we're going to focus on two parts of the brain that we're particularly interested in my laboratory, as well as many of my colleagues from around the country. And the first is the amygdala, this ancient reptilian part of the brain. We call it reptilian because reptiles have it. It relates to fear and aggression. So that's that initial focus, okay? Think about the brain stem almost like an ice cream cone, and then that first scoop, that's the most ancient part. Then there's a second scoop that's a little more developed, and then there's the third scoop, and that is where our prefrontal cortex is. In particular, what's called the ventral medial prefrontal cortex, VMPFC. Super modern, as close to recent as brains come. That's on our outer ice cream cone layer, okay? I like to call it the guru brain because it relates to ourselves. Who are we when we're thinking about our identity? And then that identity, what kind of decisions are we making based on the identity or purpose that we have? So we like to study both of those things, all right? And then researchers have shown these really scary pictures. And by the way, this is the least scary picture that is shown to these people while sitting with their heads clamped down in MRI, clanking away, claustrophobia. Then you see a rabid dog lunging at you. That is intended to stimulate the amygdala, okay? That ancient reptilian fear center. This is easy to do, by the way, okay? Watch a horror movie and you get that shudder when the person goes around the corner, and that is your amygdala, okay? Even before you say, oh, that's a person going around the corner with a knife, you just shudder, and that's your amygdala, okay? It's very easy to scare people that way, and in many people, their amygdala stays active. Nothing else happens. They just get freaked out. But here's the other part that happens. When that amygdala is getting really active, the prefrontal cortex, your guru brain, is shrinking. It's getting smaller. It's not getting as much activation, and that's a problem, right? It's easy to scare people and then get them to stop thinking. Every politician knows that, right? That's the world that we're in right now. Scare the crap out of a person, they stop thinking. So, what happens then to a resilient brain? Within 2 seconds, the prefrontal cortex starts getting more active, and the amygdala shrinks down. Imagine this. This is what's happening. I'm shocked. What do I do about it? Right? That's resilience. People who have a difficult time with that end up just getting shocked and fearful. So how do you build this guru brain more? Remember, we talked about two things. What do you like when you're at your best? And what are the things that matter most to you? When we put people in an MRI, our research team, and we ask those kind of questions, those purposeful questions, more blood flow just flows in, more activity flows into the guru brain. Imagine it almost as a muscle. Could you train this guru brain to be stronger, more resilient? We don't know that yet, but that's our next question to start asking, isn't it? Super important. But we do know if we just simply have a person think more about their best self and what matters most, what we call self-affirmation, much more goes here, and that down-regulates or pushes back, reduces the fear center. Okay? Making sense? Okay. So let's look at what purpose does. When you are more purposeful, you're less conflicted in terms of your conflict center in the brain. That's great. Also, that conflict center in the brain is also your pain center. Interesting. So we've known that if you start thinking more about your purpose or your mission, maybe you're more resilient to pain even. Interesting. Inflammation. Less inflammation if you're more purposeful. Less depression by half 10 years later. Less risk of stroke or heart attack or burnout at work. That's so important. Do you have a purpose at work? What is your best self at work? What matters most at work? This is super important nowadays. Do you develop meaningful work, whether you're a custodian or whether you're a CEO? Having purposeful work, meaningful work is really essential. Then it increases the likelihood of antibody production, which is good. We want antibodies flowing through our body. DNA repair, unbelievable. That's a whole nother TED Talk probably. Longevity, people live longer if they have a strong purpose in life. And this is controlling for age and race and gender and income and education and health status and health behaviors. Even after controlling for all of that, you live a lot longer if you are more purposeful. You sleep better, you manage your diseases better, and you even end up making more money, which is wild. If you're more purposeful, starting at baseline, whatever you're making then, you tend to start making more money if you are more purposeful. Let's look at older adults. Older adults at retirement. Imagine that older adult at retirement. Now I'll just start playing golf. Awesome. Then 5 days later, they realize they suck at golf. So they start watching the Golf Channel. Then they start eating and watching the Golf Channel. Then they start getting diabetes and watch the Golf Channel. Then they lose their legs, and with diabetes, then they die, right? So how do you repurpose your life at in older adulthood? When you retire, it's so essential to start doing this. Here's a study that was done at the Rush Alzheimer's Center, finding that people who retired and had no purpose were 2.4 times more likely 7 years later to develop Alzheimer's disease. Now, we all know people who are purposeful, very purposeful, who get Alzheimer's, and we know people who are not purposeful who never get Alzheimer's. This is just in terms of overall risk. But the risk is huge, 2.4 times. We know of no other behavior that does that. So we're working now with the AARP to develop a purpose pill. You know, can you help people develop greater purpose in their lives? And sure enough, you can at retirement. And then what we find are all these really amazing outcomes. Things like increase in optimism, reduction in loneliness, increase in resilience, improvement in physical health status. We haven't looked at Alzheimer's disease. That's a big, long study to be done. But boy, that sure is the direction we're heading. Can you build a purpose pill? If you did, everyone would be taking it, wouldn't you? What are the side effects of having a stronger purpose? Well, we've already said people with a strong purpose make more money. Yeah, that's good, fine. People with a strong purpose have more friends. Not bad. And, people with a strong purpose have better sex, too. Can we go home now? I mean, what kind of side effects are those? We're expecting all these bad things. No, the side effects are great, amazing. Have a purpose. So let's think about being more purposeful. I'd like to ask you guys, what is your best self? What are you like when you're at your best? What matters most to you in your life? What are those things? Put those together. I might ask you what's on your smartphone. Here's what's on my smartphone. My granddaughter, Madeline Julia. Now, ask yourself what's on your smartphone. Who has their kids on their smartphone? On the wallpaper, okay? How about your partner or spouse? Okay? Any parents? You have your parents on there. Awesome, okay, way to go. Anyone have their dog? Nice. Cats? Cat people, okay, fine. I'm kidding. Okay, so, awesome. So you put on the things that matter a lot to you, right? Apply your best self. Think about what you're like at your best and apply that. So I'm with my daughter my granddaughter a few weeks ago, and I asked Madeline Julia this, what do you want to be? And she says, I want to be fantastic girl. She's 3. That's a great 3-year-old purpose to have. When you're 3, being fantastic girl, awesome. Wow, so she happens to have a father, who's my son-in-law, who's a super creative guy. That's what he is like when he's at his best. Josh is best when he is creative. And he learned that his daughter wanted to become a fantastic girl. So he said, okay, her birthday's coming up on July 3rd. And so he took this video of the new Fantastic Girl outfit. So these are her special Fantastic Girl shoes, her special Fantastic Girl suit, unbelievable. And then, of course, Fantastic Girl needs all, oh, that's little Fantastic Boy who's just won. He's nuts. And Fantastic Girl belt, Fantastic Girl gloves, special flip phone, Motorola Fantastic flip phone for Fantastic Girl, special spyglass, and you see this special watch. All of this costs almost nothing, of course. So cool. But you put all that together and you give that to your daughter, along with a special Fantastic Girl mask, and you become Fantastic Girl. All I'm saying, this is a close-to-home experience of purposefulness, right? Think about what you could do in your own life. It doesn't mean you have to meditate in a cave for 6 months in India. It doesn't mean you have to leave your job. It doesn't mean you leave your family. Turn around the familiar things to you. Treat them in a new way. Think about the familiar in a new way. That's what purpose is about. And then giving it your best self. So here's my purposeful best self. My own purpose is to be an engaged son, husband, father, and grandfather now. My purpose is to teach every student as if they're my own daughter, Julia. And I've never had such feelings of love and kindness from my students who are going through so much. And that's not just my job, that's my joy to do. And I'm not always perfect at this. I try my best. I'm old now. I'm 63. I'm like the Joe Biden of professors. So I kind of have to think in a younger way. I have to stretch my mind in new ways. And that hopefully makes me younger if I can. To study purpose in life and related concepts. I'm in a school of public health. People don't study this typically. They study blood pressure. They study, your standard stuff, Ebola. I'm studying this thing, this rarefied, esoteric construct called purpose in life. That's kind of weird, but when we see purpose influencing so many things, why don't we attack it and address it and research it, study it and learn all about it? That's what we need to do. Go back to Aristotle, who talked about purpose. This is Viktor Frankl, who talked a lot about purpose. He went through 3 concentration camps as the camp physician, prisoner doctor to others, and he found that if you weren't murdered outright, chances are you would die if you lost your purpose in your life. Super important. And Viktor Frankl wrote this amazing book, Man's Search for Meaning, which really changed my own life after our loss. And he was asked, what's your purpose in life, Viktor? And he said, I want to help the world become more purposeful. Now, he was a psychotherapist as well, so he developed logotherapy or meaning therapy. He wanted to help people find greater purpose in their lives by having people sit down, and he talked to them for about an hour, and that was called logotherapy. That's great. What would Viktor Frankl do now? Well, what's my purpose now? My purpose is to help over 1 billion people find purpose in their lives. And how do I do that? Well, I try to channel somebody like Viktor Frankl, who's my hero in life. And I think if Viktor Frankl were alive now, he'd build an app. And that's what I do. I build apps to help people make changes in their lives. So I created an app called Purposeful. And Insightful is a program to help the AARP or colleges, universities, or groups that work with foster care adolescents or employers. All of these people, they're able then to see how purposeful their clientele are becoming. And that's so important, not at an individual level, but at a population level. And Purposeful, we're trying to help people simply become more purposeful. And we're using artificial intelligence. We're using machine learning to do this. I think that's what Viktor Frankl would be thinking about now in this modern age. How can we use the modern technology, modern science, to help people become better, their best self, and apply it to what matters most? So if it's all right, I'd like to conclude by reading the last page of my book. This is not a spoiler, because I'm alive, right? I just have to find the page. This is called The Lake. In the summer evening, I settle into my kayak and paddle out onto Lake Michigan. Watching the sun melt into the calm water, I still feel Julia in me. She's in my loving kindness meditation. We look at the sunset together and smile. And I wish her peace and happiness. Lately, the family portion of my purpose, to be an engaged husband and father, has required an important revision. I've added "and grandfather" with the birth of Madeline Julia, my daughter Rachel's new baby. That's one of the nice things about life, like family, like compassion, like understanding. Like a rubber band, it can be wonderfully elastic. The line in Lucretius's poem on the nature of things is as relevant now as it was over 2,000 years ago. While some are ascendant, some recede. And generations are renewed again in a brief space, passing life's torch, like relay runners in a race. Thanks to a numerical coincidence, my teaching career blesses me with a poignant gift. Every year I'm blessed with a new crop of students who are just the age that Julia reached at the end of her brief, big life. I enjoy watching each succeeding generation ascend with a commitment to finding purpose in their lives. 5 years before, at this very place on Lake Michigan, I wasn't thinking and wasn't caring about myself or anyone else. Then I felt Julia telling me that if I was to survive, I would need to get over myself and live for what matters most. I found a breeze at my back and a gentle current, and I know what harbor to make for. I have a lot to do before I die. And so do all of you. Thank you very much.